So just to let you know that the Fort Nelson First Nation is very committed in making sure that our economy is going to be robust and includes everybody. The Fort Nelson First Nation leadership, Chief and Council, our community, the Daytai Board of Directors and our staff have really worked hard to propel this project and to move it forward. And so with that, there's a lot of people within the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality that have worked hard in these efforts. Many of you in your daily interactions with your support. And I just want to acknowledge all of you and thank you, because overall, what happens in Fort Nelson First Nation territory affects us all. And we're here to really move on a path forward that looks after our families and ensure that our families can be together and that we can work together on a path of reconciliation and ensure that our future generations really do have an opportunity and a livelihood. And as a nation and as a leader, we're really well guided by our elders and many of those that have passed on, and we're always thinking 7 generations ahead. So whatever we do and whatever we're a part of, we welcome you as our treaty partners, and your children matter to us as much as our children. And there's a lot of history here and a lot of families here that have made Fort Nelson what it is. And I thank you for that. So just a round of applause for that. And your guys' continue. We know that things have not been easy here, and we're really dedicated to trying to make a difference. We know that we're navigating on uncharted waters and trying to chart a new course in our territory with promises of new opportunities for our people and those of you that are here today, and to mark a significant departure from the past by collaborating with all of you, our partners, our industry partners like Peak, who are aligning with our objectives and empower us to bring this project to what it is today. And we hope to see more of this happening as we move forward with other people that we're working in the territory. Obviously, you know that we're working hard on our efforts with the geothermal facility. We're working at a partner on a hydrogen facility. And you know, I think it's really important for any First Nation to be able to manage their resources in a responsible way, where we strike that balance between economic prosperity for all of us and environmental stewardship. Because at the end of the day, we all like to hunt, we all like to fish, we all like to trap, we like to be on the land and enjoying that with our families. So I look forward to being able to achieve that goal collectively with all of you. So just reflecting on our achievements, we established the community forest, and it stands as the largest tenure award ever in BC. And I think that's a testament of the collective efforts of the Fort Nelson First Nation and the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. Our MOU features an equity stake for the Fort Nelson First Nation, and it also signifies a genuine partnership that's tangible with the ownership opportunity for us. Working hand in hand with Peak, we successfully transferred all the CAN4 licenses, which was a pivotal step in our journey, and the Fort Nelson First Nation tender offer, a substantial milestone, amounts to over 1.2 million cubic meters of fiber, and showcasing the enormity of our progress. Our commitment to the land management framework underscores our privilege to uphold the highest forestry practices, respecting the land, the water, our village sites, traditional use areas, caribou, and habitat. And together we can craft a sustainable long-term forestry plan. Engaging with Peak and the hydrogen naturally, we are advocating both to BC and the federal government to ensure the success of this project. It's a lot of work. We've been at this since 2017, and As all of you know, that things just don't happen overnight. Takes a lot of sweat and tears and a lot of commitment, dedication to get this kind of stuff done. And we're going to really need your help with addressing the railway issue. So our joint application to the National Trades Corridor Fund signifies our collective efforts towards reconciliation, where the federal government is ready to put some money for the investment, and we have to get the commitment from British Columbia, and we're working well on that. We'll be meeting as leaders on both sides in Prince George for the Natural Resource Forum, where we're hoping that we will have an opportunity to speak to the Premier and Ministry of Forests and Indigenous Minister. So with that, while we're working on the broader project, we are initiating forestry projects to create immediate economic opportunities and lay the foundation for our larger goals. The Fort Nelson First Nation tenures in collaboration with our community forests are an integral part of this vision. And this endeavor is crucial for our community and for our people, and recognizing the profound impact of employment on the individuals and our families and getting us all together again. We urge everyone here, our people, the town, our partners to unite in this endeavor, and together we can make this vision a reality. So with that, thank you, and I'll pass it on to Mayor Fraser.
So thank you, Chief Gale, for those remarks. They're appreciated. We certainly look forward to working with you and your nation and your council, all the folks on the reserve to further all of our communities as we move forward in this region. We recognize that we are on the traditional territory, your traditional territory, your people's traditional territory. We recognize the treaty, we recognize the rights within that treaty, and our ability to use the land in a shared way. So thank you for starting us off well. Tonight, it's amazing to see as many people who have come out tonight, and the folks that are online. It was pulled together fairly quickly, but perhaps not as quickly as Brian would have liked. Full disclosure, I met Brian a month ago, just early part of December. Haven't met him before. When he requested a meeting with me, I had one plan. And that was to try to get him to come to the community and update everybody on what we were doing. But I didn't have to present that plan. It was his idea. That's what he wanted to meet me for. He had an idea that he wanted to meet with us. I think we met on the 3rd, and he wanted to meet with us on the 5th. But there was just no way we were going to be able to pull a meeting like this together where we could get as many people in the room and set it up online as we can. But everybody worked hard to make sure that we got a meeting pulled off for tonight. So it's my duty, I guess, to introduce Brian Fair. It's amazing that I didn't meet him before, because when we sat down to lunch and talked about some of the people that we know, we were involved in a lot of the same circles for quite a long time, but we never did get the opportunity to meet with each other. And some of the characters that I know that he knows and I've known for a long time, some of them passed on now. It is really amazing that we have this background and never met. So Brian is here tonight to give a presentation on behalf of Peak. We also have Karen Jensen. I think she's online, Senior Manager for Business Development and Marketing at CN. And to see that CN is stepping up and taking an interest in this project and our community and the potential issues we have around the rail line is very interesting. So it'll be very interesting to hear what Karen has to say tonight with respect to that rail and where we're moving with that. So there will be 2 presentations. So Brian will make a presentation on behalf of Peak. Karen will make a presentation on behalf of CN, and then we'll have a question period. And I'll have a few more remarks with respect to how that question period will go. We've got some folks online, so we have to give them an opportunity to weigh in as well. So we'll see how that all works together, but I'll have a few more comments with respect to what the format of the question period will be like. And for now, I'll turn it over to Brian and allow him to make his presentation. And thank you for coming to the community, Brian. Appreciate it.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me in the back there? Roberta? Thanks. Not badly. When I'm walking through this room, I sure see a lot of faces that I recognize. And if I don't know your name, I'm sorry. I started in 1979 working up here for Cattermole. And I think I talked to Harvey Bain about that a couple times. I know Harvey worked there, and me and my dad worked at Cattermole here and in Watson Lake. We'd go back and forth and do maintenance. Later on, that became the OSB plant on that site. But in the meantime, we moved some of the log deck and stuff over for Bob Lundy and Kurt Garland that started Takima. So at that time, I was working for Wayne Midnight and Don Clutterham. And I was working with guys like Lawrence Forsberg and Lyle Mullaney, Clifford Mullaney, and drinking in the bar with guys like Denny Swanson. So I have quite a history in this town of way before Dan's Pub of working hard up on the industrial site. And then when Dan's Pub opened, moving from the hotel and the trap line over to Dan's Pub. So 27 years ago, I straightened all that up and I haven't had a beer since then, but Dan's Pub was one of the last places I had a beer. So I see a lot of people that I recognize. I know a lot of names in this meeting here tonight, and I love talking about some of those days back then. So without further, see a lot of people in here that I'm really, really glad to see that I've met. Chestine, I didn't recognize you tonight, but certainly remember meeting you, and different people that I see. It's like, wow, that's cool. It's really cool to see on -41 people coming out. That's looks like Fort Nelson to me. I'm born and raised in Vanderhoof, and just been very, very sad to see Chetwynd North with the sawmill shut down. Mackenzie is completely shut down. Fort Nelson had oil and gas and forestry. You know, it was more lively here 30 years ago than it is today. It's just wrong on all kinds of levels. And so I had worked 10 years in America, and Trump came in, I watched that, and I watched all the economic activity, and then I watched the craziness of walking into anywhere you go, and you were immediately identified as either a Democrat or a Republican. And it just wasn't fun because I was neither. And so coming back to Canada and deciding to get back involved in the forest industry that I'm born and raised in, I'm okay. So now the rules are that we have to work with Indigenous people. Okay, well, I'll have to figure that out. And so away I go. And came up here, and I met with Charlene and the council of the day, and Lana Lowe was there from the LRMP project. And I convinced them that we could do the right thing in here for forestry after 12 years. And I fought with guys like Ben Wallman, one of the biggest conversations I ever had here. I thought we were going to duke it out on the street. And I talked to Scotty Berry, who I'd known forever. I came to town council, and that was in 2020. So it's 4 friggin' years ago, and it's embarrassing. So without further ado, I'll go to the project. So this is just an update meeting today of exactly where we are today. So BFG company, I built a company called Bid Group, and Bid was Brian, Ike, and David. And Ike was my dad, and he died November 18th, 1985. We worked the weekend at Plateau Mills in Vanderhoof, and on Monday morning, Dad was driving home the 12 miles between Plateau and Vanderhoof, and he fell asleep and hit a chip truck, a Lomac chip truck head on. And he was gone, and my little brother David was in the car. And we had already started Bid. So Bid was Brian, Ike, and David. So Ike was gone. And January 2010, David was a Golden Gloves boxer and had probably been hit in the head too many times, and he had a brain aneurysm and a stroke. So all of a sudden it was just Brian. And we grew that. And I bought a big company in Quebec, 1,000 employees. And I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and we turned Bid into $1 billion in sales. And I was tired. I'd worked in America for 10 years. I was just tired of the politics. And so I sold Bid. And then when I started something again, I thought, oh, Bid, Brian, Ike, David, well, I'll just do my name. And so that's what BFG is, Brian Fair Group. And some of the people in this room might understand who Formula is. Formula builds bridges. I saw the CEOs in the Northwest Territory. He phoned me from Fort Nelson and he said he was halfway there to wherever he went up in the north. Like it's a long way to wherever he was building a bridge. And so those are the companies that each company there has a CEO. The CEO of Peak North America is sitting right here, Leif Nargard, and I'm very glad and he's even in work clothes. I like it. But those are the different companies that we run and keep going. So the idea of Peak Renewables, we're going to develop a portfolio of wood pellets and focusing on sustainability partnerships with Indigenous communities. And we're doing that by buying up legacy sites. So I would call the Takima plant a legacy site, the OSB plant a legacy site. We bought the Chetwynd pulp mill. We have the Chetwynd sawmill and pellet plant. And we're trying our hardest to stay true to our roots of Vanderhoof, where when you're in Vanderhoof and you're sitting in Vancouver, everybody calls that Northern British Columbia. And I know it makes people like up here to throw up and they think of Prince George as Northern BC. But we believe in sustainability, local communities and Indigenous partnerships. And that's what I want my legacy to be. So I put this down as a recap. And it could be, we could have added a lot more into here, but basically I started my first discussion with Fort Nelson First Nation commenced in the summer of 2020. And I came up here for a meeting with Charlene, and because Canfor told me that they had an LOI to sell the OSB plant to a company called, it's Ronnie Stern. I don't know what his company name is. And I said, yeah, but that's been going for 3 years. How come I never get a 3-year LOI from you? And so the CEO goes, well, the only way you can do that is if you go and talk to First Nation into it. So I came up here and I talked to Charlene and her group, and I convinced them that we were the right answer. And so we signed an agreement with FNFN somewhere around August 2020. And then I went and bought the site from Canfor. And not only did I buy the site from Canfor, but I bought their forest license. And James and I were talking about it at lunch today. Hey, you know, you people, there's lots of seats here. There's seats on this side, seats over here. Come on in. Don't be shy. I guess some people like hanging around, but there's lots of room. Come on in. So bought the site in, and I negotiated with Canfor, bought the license, and that took a lot of consultation. There was like a year that had to go into Bill 22. Just on a side note, James, I was thinking about it. At the same time, that's when we were starting to, in Canfor, they were selling, and I was helping them with Seke Dene and Mahalik Indian Band. That's just in Bill 22 now. That's taken that long to negotiate that. Like, it's not a simple process to go through all the consultation. So we acquired the site from Canfor. That's just one line on there that was a year's work to the point at noon today. The discussions with the province regarding the rail commencing in fall of 2022. Probably the most frustrating process by far that I've been through here is dealing with the province on everything, but specifically the railway. John Horgan, who I know and don't even mind, but he was just adamant that they weren't doing anything. The Liberals had sold out the railway, and he just absolutely was against it. We've had better luck so far with David Eby, and we've had great luck with CN. My whole life in the North I've heard a lot of people call down CN, including me. But I'll tell you, since they've got a new CEO now, and she has a team of people, and I'm assuming that one of them might be on this call right now, but there's just huge kudos from me to CN for how hard they're pushing to help make this work. So we're going to get into that later on. But the talks with the province just have went nowhere good, although maybe a little bit better after John Horgan left. I can't read current rail cannot operate. Yeah, well, I think we all know. I was with the guys from Cam and Zonk last weekend, and I think Cam told me that he landed a helicopter somewhere on the rail line, and he saw the train coming in, and it was like going sideways. It was like at 10 miles an hour, and it wobbling back and forth. I mean, it's stupid. It's just wrong what's happening. So hopefully we can get a train running with a rate that makes sense. Discussions with the province commenced to fiber up the project in the fall of 2020. Investigations into export shipping points begin with spring of 2021. There's about 2 million cubic meters of tenure secured, mostly via Fort Nelson First Nation. That is just amazing. We're really happy with the progress of the tenure and the different changes it's been through, and very happy. Application for rail funding to the National Trade Quarter funding. That is going good. We believe federally there's $50 million sitting for a $100 million project. Now the estimate of $100 million is a little bit of a BS number. We're not sure what that is, but CN has put, my understanding, and hopefully we hear that tonight, is that CN is actually putting a plan and a budget together. And we're very happy that they're doing that. And that number will be respected by the federal government and the provincial government. But we believe that half of that money is available federally through the National Trade Quarter funding. And we're hoping that we can convince the provincial government, whether that's with your help or the First Nations help or however that works. We don't believe that the project can absorb the price of fixing the railway up. And just on a side note, Bob Lundy was a very good friend of mine who built Takama. And when after he retired and he was sitting in, just before he died, he was telling me a story about going to W.A.C. Bennett's when he was dying. And on his hospital bed, there was Bill Bennett, W.A.C. Bennett's son, and Bob Lundy. And W.A.C. Bennett looked at his son, Bill Bennett, and he goes, "Don't let that railway fail." That railway was a legacy to W.A.C. Bennett, who was a great premier of British Columbia. And we feel that we need to get that. We feel that opening up the rail, while it would be great for us and for the pellet plant, it would also be great for Fort Nelson and oil and gas mining and some of the other things that are needed that are already talked about around here. So we think that while it's really important for the pellet plant, it's also really important for the people. Province declines to match the federal funding. So again, very frustrating. That was at a time when Oregon was absolutely not doing anything because that was a Liberal project. It's not a Liberal project. It's a project to help the north of British Columbia, which brings big taxes to the province. I guess they haven't figured out where their money comes from yet. Project shifts from export focus to domestic focus. So this meeting today is not an awful lot about that. We're trying our hardest to build a great big facility in Redwater, which is Fort Saskatchewan or Edmonton. And that will be to burn pellets, gasify the pellets, take hydrogen off and sequester the fiber. And I know those are big words for the people in this room. That project is destined to start around 2027. We want to start the pellet plant before that and export the pellets. That's the plan. Although long term, we believe those pellets will stay in Canada, which is way better for Canada. CN assigns new team, and that's from the new CEO. I mean, I sat on a call with the last CEO named JJ that Charlene was running, your chief Charlene was running, and you know, it was polite, but it was corporate smooth. It was like talking to Canfor, quite frankly. I hope I didn't insult any Canfor people in the room, like Jim McDonald. New discussions open with the government of BC. So CN Rail has put a team together, and I'm hoping some of those people are on this call later today. CN Rail assigns a new team, and we have started fresh discussions, and they've been going very well. New discussions open with the government of BC about the potential support for rail in the fall of 2023. And that's kind of where we're failing in my mind. Although I know that I met with the chief today, and I know that she's pushing to have meetings with the Premier David Eby and the Forest Minister and the Indigenous Affairs Minister, all those kind of people in Prince George next week. And Charlene has a way of getting her message through, I've noticed. That was pretty polite. The updated MOU between Peak Renewable and FNF is drafted. It's not signed, but it's close right now. And James, the lawyer, and I were talking about that last night. So we feel good about that. And the biggest reason that I thought it was time for an update is one of the big hurdles. If the hurdles are the railway, the offtake agreement, the fiber, and most of those are getting through. Another big one was we had to get rid of the OSB equipment. It was very clear to me with the First Nation that they did never want to start up that OSB plant for their own personal reasons. And so I'm like, okay, and so I believe that I've sold that to a company called Rex Lumber Company, and we're moving it to Enterprise, Alabama. And the reason I say I believe that is because they wrote me a check for $5 million. So that generally speaking, when somebody writes a check like that, it goes through. And just a side note on that, Leaf, who's here, was in a meeting with the ministry. They call it the DOE down there, the Department of Energy. And the guy walked in and he said to Leaf, okay, what can I do to help? We have never once heard that in British Columbia from the Ministry of Environment. We hear roadblock, 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 roadblock. And Leaf said he called me and he goes, I looked at the guy and I go, where did you come from? And the guy guaranteed that we'd have an answer in 4 months. Like we heard in Chapel to restart that pellet plant might be 1.5 to 4 years. It's just crazy the difference between wanting to get projects done, and people wonder why people are moving to America. So that's good for a recap. I could go way more into every one of those lines, but that's where we are today. Status of OSB equipment, keep going. So what does it mean for FNFN of the town of Fort Nelson? Job opportunities, increased contracting opportunities, increased throughput for local businesses. We started on, I'm gonna say December 1st. Is that close, Leaf? So December 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there, we started with our crew and a crew that we worked together with for 40 years called JDT, Daryl Keelan from Prince George. We came up here and we worked maybe 14 days or 13 days in December and then took a break and then came back now. We have now hired 3 First Nation from Fort Nelson. We have Jamie Bird here, who's Clay today from Prince George. Justin Napoleon from Shetland works with us. We're trying our hardest to work with the First Nation. We're working on resumes. We're working on what to do with it. And we have to balance that with profitability and safety. We've got man lifts 100 feet in the air right now, cutting, and it is like some of the most dangerous work in demolition of heavy steel. And so we're very sensitive to what we do, but we have to work that together to working with the people. So that's where we are. And I'm working on hiring a forester that will live in the town here. So if anybody has any suggestions on that, please call me. I talked to Danny Souls about it for a bit today, actually. Increased throughput for local businesses. We assume that our 14 or 15 people here are eating food here, renting apartments, renting motels, and all the stuff that construction brings. We're trying our hardest to go to a level of 14 to 15 people for a couple of months and then slowly start ramping it up, but never quitting again until the OSB plant is gone and then starting on the construction. Our dream would be, well, we have a timeline. So how long will it take to remove the OSB equipment? Around 12 months. Leaf, that's still after today, your plan, right? So when I say Leaf, if I'm wrong on that date, I got that directly from him this morning. So 15 people today. Electrical, we've got a couple of guys disconnecting electrical. Those same guys that disconnect that will be putting it back in Enterprise, Alabama. Structural steel, we're disassembling it. The equipment is being disassembled, and there's a crane and a man lift way up in the air there. And the other 2 things you see sticking up are actually conveyors that took the OSB from the strander up to the dryer. Refurbishment this year is all about taking all the equipment out. The first half of, and we'll start a little bit of refurbishment, but we'll pull that equipment into the warehouse and we'll be sandblasting it, painting it. So that those kind of trades will come later. And shipping, we won't be doing any movement before like September or October in 2024, this year. So 8 months before we move anything. And that's because on the other end, it's not ready. That they're going through, we've got a piece of land, 425 acres in Enterprise, and they're going through a rezoning process. And if that was in Fort Nelson or Vanderhoof or Prince George, I'd be worried. I'm not worried down there. They've guaranteed me that in 6 months that's done. Don't worry about it. Just a way different attitude about getting it done. Keep going. So our plan is to build a 600,000 ton pellet plant, and the biggest thing that we've got done, well, there's a couple of things. We own the land and the business that eventually will become First Nation land after we clean up all the environmental concerns that are on the land. We've done that in Canal Flats, Cranbrook, Rustad's, like I think maybe 6 mills I've cleaned up environmentally, so it doesn't scare me. It's just a time consuming thing. But the timeline will be disassembly of the OSB equipment in 24, starting the construction of the pellet plant in 25, startup of the pellet plant in 26, and in 27, 600,000 metric tons a year. That is all contingent on the rail. That we will not be able to find and get the financing for a $135 million pellet plant unless we get that rail. So if there's one message for those people that actually believe this might happen, and for those people who want to be on side, I know that the First Nation is 100, the council is behind us completely. And I know that Charlene is already talking about meetings with the government on this coming week. But if there's Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, City Council, all of the groups that are voices for the community, anything that will help get behind that and write letters to the government that honestly doesn't really care about Fort Nelson or about the North. And that's the most frustrating thing for me. The government of the day gets their votes from Vancouver Island and Surrey. They don't need anything in the North, and it's really, really obvious to us. But we're still fighting and caring, and we feel we're getting a little bit of support lately, so we're just keeping on trying. The next page has some pictures that go back just for a second. Sorry. The key challenges are the rail infrastructure, getting logging started. You know, this town, when I was here 40 years ago, I think all the logging contractors I knew that would come in for 100 days and get a lot of wood out of here. I would say that's not going to be able to just start up by turning a key. And so that is a bit of an issue that I see the First Nation and the community forest are starting. And I know that's what I talked to Danny about a little bit this morning. I think that's not easy to get that much logging started. And sustainability required for the pellets to export, that we have an issue for sure in perception. Somehow it's okay to cut a log down, somehow it's okay to cut a log down, make OSB, somehow it's okay to cut the log down and make lumber, but it's not okay to make pellets, which is just an effort to stop all logging in the province. And so it would be very, very easy to stop all logging in the province. I'm not sure what that does for forest fires and for jobs and all of the things that I think most of the people in this room care about. That just some conceptual drawings. And if anybody wants this presentation, I'm sure they can get that from this young lady up here or through the Scott Berry. Scott, if you can make this presentation available to anybody that asks for it, that's a conceptual drawing. And the bottom right is exactly how the OSB was brought in 8-10 foot type lengths through a water pond. And then we change it from there because we use a different kind of a barker. But from there on, it changes it. That is a plant, and I've built like 9 pellet plants in North America. So Leaf has been involved with a lot of them. So we're very comfortable inside the existing mill, but with the bins going outside onto the rail line. Another picture that just shows how it works. You chip them, you dry them, and then you hammer mill them to make kind of a fine powder before you make pellets. Just the outfeed that goes onto the railway, gets weighed, puts into cars. This was put on kind of as a jab at here we've been for 4 years. I bought the Pack Bio pellet plant in Prince George less than a year ago, and we're on startup right now. Those are live pictures. That means permitting, concrete, building, getting all the electric tied up and getting it running. It was less than a year. And that's how a project should go. And instead we get stuck in this is bigger, but we get stuck in all the different rules and regulations. It's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts is what I call it. It's not one thing, it's like 50 things that just when you add it all together. But that is just how the pellet plant works. Keep going. There is actual pellets coming from Dothan, Alabama right now going out. And we're not in production. I think, Leaf, what did we say on the phone this morning? February 5th? February 5th or something like that. So just what we're doing as far as financing. So we believe this project is $135 million. We believe that we're financing the project with a combination of equity and debt. And we're working on it, but we're you know, I think of all the things I've built for around this money. With the OSB move is a $255 million job. We've already got the financing figured out for that. So it's the biggest thing stopping the financing right now is people say, well, how are you going to get it to the port? Well, we're going to get the rail rebuilt. How are you going to do that? Well, we don't know. Right. And that just stops right there. That stops the talk. They go, yeah, right. We've heard that for 12 years in Fort Nelson. Right. So it's just a big part of how to get going. Employment, there'll be 80 direct hires and 500 indirect, big logging operations, transportation, logistics, etc. Project development, we 100% want to bring the plant online with non-merchantable solids, pulpwood, in other words, what we call pulp mill all over. And for years and years in the north, and I'm sure in Fort Nelson, prescribed burning. Danny, is that a way you do stuff up here? Prescribed burning? So we don't like that. We want to get rid of prescribed burning. You know, you talk about the carbon being emitted in the air. It's one of the worst things you can do is burn that fiber. So we want to take it and control what happens to that fiber. We believe that we're going to scale the plant to full capacity, and we believe that we're working from the very first day I walked in here to talk to both town council and the First Nations. I have explained very clearly to everybody that to start the pellet plant up, the saw logs need to be shipped out of town for a while. I don't want to ship those saw logs out of town. I absolutely want that we produce them here, but that's not how we're starting this up. So that commitment is from me. None of those logs are owned by anybody else but the project, which is me, which is our group, Peak, and the First Nations. So that's how we're doing all of this. Keep on. This is getting probably in quite a bit too much detail for this meeting, but we have a good woodlands action plan, and it's based on an LRMP process that the First Nations came up with, Lana and her group, and completely logging based on how the First Nations will accept that gets done on their land. I am a pretty big believer, and it's been one of the changes. I'm a redneck from Vanderhoof, and I can tell you 20 years ago, I would never have stood up here and said that, but I believe that after working in America and after thinking a lot about democracy, I believe we vote in a government, and I believe if the government decides, whether we like it or not, if the government we elect decides that we are going to work like we are with UNDRIP and First Nation, that I'm going to be part of it proudly. And so that's what I've given my thought process to. And so we believe 100% that a lot of this land is on First Nation land. I believe that I have agreed with the First Nation that we'll clean up the property. We'll put the property in our name and clean it up environmentally so that they can finance it, because they won't finance it with some of the issues that are up there today, historical issues. But that land hopefully will actually end up as reservation land. I would be very proud to be part of that. So all of those are just issues between us and First Nation and Community Forest Agreement, and we believe that we have to prove that we're the best place. We should be automatically because of our proximity to the trees, but we believe that we have to be the right people to bring those logs to. And the land number 4 is really important, that there's a plan that we work to. It's what makes this all work, is that we understand. And I was laughing at Lana, the first day in Atlanta, she talked about a 20-year plan. The corporations in British Columbia, like Canfor and West Fraser and those kind of companies, they've never been able to get more than a 5-year plan. And I think Lana thought the 20-year plan was going to be tough on us. Hell, we'd prefer a 20-year plan over a 5-year plan. So we're quite happy with deciding, you know, the proximity to streams, the proximity to historic family issues, all the different things that came up in the LRMP. It was great. And then working with FNFN and building and executing a contractor recruitment strategy, because that's going to mean some of the contractors have to invest money in equipment, or we have to figure a way how to do that with. Keep on. Takama update. This is only to talk just for a minute about Takama. So we've had a bit of a problem over the last year or two with people coming into the Takama site, which is in really bad shape. They had a fire there that started in an electrical short, and you know, maybe the electrical short was because some people had been scrounging copper. don't know that for sure. It's very, very likely. And so we've got a plan to clean up the Chacma site. We think the Chacma site is a really, really good place for something beyond pellets, whether it's camps, and reuse the residuals after pellets. Like there's that's the biggest one that's forming in my head. So we believe that site will be a bunch more cheap. So that planned use of the site is still, it's a bit early to talk about it. Keep going. That's it. I look forward to the question period. I bring it on. I am here. I have personally spent about $10 million on this project. $10 million that I didn't necessarily have, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I still am committed to this project as long as I believe that the First Nation want us here and the community wants us here. If we don't feel wanted, then that's okay too. I think that you guys are great people. I think it's tough living in Fort Nelson, man. It takes hardy people to live up here. And I think you've been really, really ripped off over the years. But I sit and I've worked lots in high level Alberta, and I don't get why high level can have a successful forest industry with OSB, sawmill, pellets, and we can't here. It's further from high level to Prince Rupert or Vancouver to the ocean than it is from Fort Nelson. It's only one difference, and it's the provinces. And believe me, Alberta is different to work in than British Columbia. So that would be kind of where I am on this. And looking forward to, I hope the lady from CN is on. How many people are on the Zoom? Who? 51. Holy shit. That's really cool. Thanks everybody for being on. Sorry if I said the wrong words. I had to start with that bad story that everybody said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for that. We'll let you sit down, have a drink of water, and we feel your pain when it comes to working with Victoria. And you know, it's been difficult, and you know, I've been mayor for a year, and I've been following the whole time that I was away, you know, the difficulties. And when I was mayor in Taylor, it was very similar, you know, that we're the opposite end of the province and then our seat of government, and they just really don't even know they're there. So we feel your pain there, and we do what we can to keep plugging and let them know. I think I'm going to start every meeting that I have with the minister from now on with a map and actually show them where we are, because I really don't think, I think they have a map down there of BC that goes as far as Hope, and then it shrinks everything down, and then there's a line there that says the rest of BC, right? So that they don't think of us much. So is Karen online? Yeah, Pearso, good. So welcome, Karen. Again, Karen is the Senior Manager of Business Development and Marketing at CN, and I believe she's got a presentation. Oh, there she is. Hi, Karen.
Hi there.
So I believe you have a presentation for us that will take a few minutes, and then we'll start the question and answer period.
Yes, if you can just allow me a minute to find the presentation, and it's just one slide. I just need a minute to find it, please.
Sure.
Okay, I am ready. I'm ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to ask you, Karen, because I wasn't sure. Are you prepared to take questions at the end as well, along with Brian?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm Karen Jensen, Senior Manager of Business Development for CN Rail. I've been with CN now for 16 years, and I have been looking after the territories British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg. And so I'm super excited to work shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in Peak Renewables and this project. And when I first heard about the project, I was very excited to join the team and to see what we could do to help get this project off the ground. So I'm just going to share a screen with everybody, just a big overview, bit of a slide to show the overview about CN Rail, and just a few fun facts about CN in British Columbia. So just bear with me. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. I'm just gonna scroll down. So this is our CN network. It's a very large network. It's approximately 23,000 miles from coast to coast to coast. And so some fun facts are generally 17,000 approximately railroaders are employed by CN. And then you could see we pay about our fair share of taxes, $1.4 billion paid to all the municipalities or across the different countries. But to be more aligned with you folks here in Fort Nelson, I thought we'd share a slide about British Columbia. So can you all see that? I'm just going to move the picture out of there. So you can see right now, interesting enough, in British Columbia, we have 2,441 railroaders employed. I'm a railroader, and then super excited to be a railroader. And then we operate 2,800 miles in British Columbia alone. And then CN spends approximately $554 million a year in British Columbia on all the different activities that we do. So we are contributing very much to the economies of British Columbia as well. And you can see our top 3 commodities in British Columbia are intermodal. That's the symbol of a container. Secondly is coal. And then thirdly is forest products. So again, we realize we are a big, we are key to helping make this go, and we are working hard to help Brian and his team get this project over the finish line. So I'll just say in British Columbia, CN's paid $191 million worth of taxes, and we've contributed $1.1 million in community partnerships. So you'll see here, for instance, CN contributed to CN Fort St. John Hospital. CN contributed, the BC Community Board contributed towards the purchase of Broda chairs, which are mobile seats that provide a safe, comfortable option for patients to move ahead in a seated or prone position. So we have folks in our community board that are very much community minded and are looking for places to invest as part of their budget under the CN community. But back to this project here, Peak Renewables, we are very happy and very excited to help support Brian and his team, and are thrilled to be working shoulder to shoulder with them to help get this project off the ground. That's it. I just didn't want to get too much into it. I didn't want to, this is a Peak Renewable call, but if you have any questions, happy to take them at the end.
And in that vein, I have a few rules with respect to how we'll carry out the question period. So you'll be given 30 seconds to speak and ask your questions, and it is enough time. We're really not looking for people to use this meeting as a soapbox opportunity. If you've got an opinion, you can get it in 30 seconds and ask your question. Well, we're prepared to allow that. The idea is to get as many people to ask questions as possible. And you know what, if it gets around and you have another question, there'll be another opportunity for you to ask that question. So people in the room can ask your questions by raising your hand. I'll be carrying a microphone around and ask you to use that microphone, because the folks that are attending virtually won't be able to hear you unless you use that microphone. And really there's 51 of them out there, and it's important that they get an opportunity to hear as well. So virtual attendees can use the raise your hand feature to indicate they want to ask a question. And when queued, we'll ask you to unmute and speak. And when you're finished speaking, we'll ask you to mute your microphone, or we'll mute it for you. Alternatively, the chat function can be used to ask a question by typing it, and then we'll read it aloud in the order that they're received. So when Jaylene gets them, she'll write them down, put her hand up, and after that question, whatever question is going on at the time, I'll come up and get that and read it. So when it's your turn to speak, please state your name before you speak. So there has been a lot of interest in tonight's discussion, and the fact that we've got 60-some people in here and 51 online tells you that there's a lot of people interested in tonight's discussion. So many people may want to ask questions of our speakers. There are many viewpoints out there with respect to these projects, rail and as well as peaks, from people who adamantly oppose to people who are in favor. There have been opinions expressed on social media platforms that are diametrically opposed to each other, and all of this can lead to heated discussions and emotional responses. I hope to avoid that tonight and create a space where everyone is free to speak their questions, ask their questions. Let's be respectful to our speakers, respectful to ourselves and each other as we progress through this discussion. So thank you again all for coming. I have a few questions, but let's begin. Oh, and 30 seconds, we've got a timer up at the front here. It'll go green. I won't be able to see it, I don't think. But once it goes red, that's when I'll ask you to ask your question if you haven't asked it already. And that'll be the end of your time. And then Brian or Karen will be able to answer the questions then at that point. Okay, so questions? Yeah, please. Okay, go on ahead.
I just a quick comment about the 51 people online. I sat down at my phone and Ben Wall emailed me and told me that he's online. So Ben, I'm glad you're online. I love it. Ben Wall and I got into a very, very good heated discussion. And at the end he said, you know, Brian, we have to get along because I have a brother in Vanderhoof. I go, who's your brother? And he's like, Craig Wall. I'm like, jeepers, Ben, like that's one of my best friends. We can't fight. So it was quite funny actually.
Okay, the first question is from an online person, and I think you answered this, but we'll ask Karen to answer it as well. So the question is, how much will it cost to rebuild that rail line?
I'm assuming Karen's the rail expert. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Well, we're just working on those numbers right now, and we don't have them in yet. All I know is this project is very important to CN, so I've contacted my subject matter experts in the engineering field and the bridges field. So I've gone straight to the Vice President of Bridges and the Assistant Chief of Engineering, and they are subject matter experts, and they are currently, as we speak, putting those numbers together for us.
I would add having a little bit more, I don't know anything about it, so I'll add a bit more. We started at as that it was going to be a $40 million project, then it went up to $60 million by some railroaders like JDS was involved in it. And the last numbers that I've heard since the 3 years is up to $100 million, of which we believe half is going to come from the federal government, and we're hoping half from the provincial government, who actually own the land of the track that it's on. And so it's just mind-boggling that they won't step up to the plate. So my number is 100 million. Let's see how far out I am.
Let's see.
We're very, very, very happy that CN is stepping up to the plate, by the way, Karen.
Yeah, I can reiterate that. I know from speaking to the past mayor, when I was mayor and had meetings with him, that he was extremely frustrated with the response he was getting from CN time and time again. And, you know, so it's very refreshing to hear you, Karen, saying that, you know, that the new president is very interested in this project, and you're all interested in moving it forward. And that you're actually taking some real action to identify what the costs are. So I think that's a breath of fresh air to most people in this room. Next question. Just a reminder to keep your name.
Hi, my name is Sandy Hart. Brian Fair, I would really like to know, with all of the frustration that is so clear on this project, why are you still here? Beating your head against a wall. I just can't imagine why.
I love small communities. I am perfectly okay that people are either for us or against us. I think everybody has the right to do that. But I think it's the right thing to do. I've been in the forest industry my whole life. I have grade 11. I was a certified welder and a certified millwright by the time I was 20 years old. I've done nothing but forest industry work my whole life. And I have always loved Fort Nelson and Mackenzie and Fort St. John and Chetwynd, and it's always been my life. And so I just decided I was going to help, and I came up here, and I feel when I see the drug problems on the reservation and the drug problems in town, and when I see my heart goes out to Fort Nelson. And so I'm just here because I want to be here. I don't have to be here. I have a beautiful home in Canal Flats, British Columbia. I have a 40,000 acre ranch with 1,000 head of cattle, and I probably have more cattle than Danny sold. I don't know. And I would love nothing better than to be home in bed on the Columbia Lake, except that I feel a calling to be up here and Mackenzie and Joe. I love the North. That's it. Thanks for the question, Sandy.
We've got another question from a online person, and this is to you, Karen. Would you be able to outline the time frame to upgrade the line once the pellet plant is near completion?
Well, we're still working on that too, and it's going to be contingent on securing the funding, the NTCF funding and the funding from the BC government. But it's going to be fast because we're working in parallel with Peak Renewables. So we're definitely aligned there. We'll find that out. As I mentioned in the response to the other question, we have our subject matter experts, and they are the experts. They have the timeline, and that is going to be coming from them. I apologize, I don't have specifics, but it's got to be in line with Peak Renewables.
Thank you.
I would like to add to that a little bit, and that is that the line from Fort St. John to Buick is in really good shape. I don't know how many people in this room understand where Buick is, but it's basically from Buick to here. And there's many different experts beyond CN that have walked and helicoptered and rode that line. And so we're getting 3 or 4 different party verification, validity, whatever word you want to use. We're getting a lot of different experts looking at it, and we're looking at it together. And there's no issue at the speed that CN is going at it now that they will be ready when we're ready.
Any question back here?
Jim McDonald. I have a question. You kind of answered. Buick is about 76 on the Alaska Highway where you go into Buick. How far does the rail go, which is still certain capacity? And has anybody, it continues to talk about Peak being the only one interested in this pipeline, which I think is a little misleading. I believe there's lots of oil and gas, there's lots of logging, and there's tons of things from where that originates in Fort St. John to where it ends in Fort Nelson. So I think there's a little confusion that we need to build a rail for Peak. We need to build a rail for the industries, which is our fuel. Do they meet with outside of that? Is it all pressure on Fort Nelson and Peak Industry and the First Nations in our town? Or are we working closely with the oil and gas industry that would also be interested in this rail?
Karen.
So, sorry, it was hard to hear. I think there was 5 questions in there approximately. So
I think he's looking.
Sorry?
I think he's looking to understand, you know, the total scope of the value of that rail to all of the different industries that might use it, and what is CN doing to sort of gather all of those folks together? Is it all on us and Peak?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the recap of the questions. Question number 1, I did hear. Where does the end of the line go? The end of the line right now goes into Fort Nelson. So that's the end of the line. And we currently ship loaded diesel cars into Fort Nelson today. And so I believe another question is the line isn't just for Peak, it's for other commodities as well. And you're absolutely right, whoever that person was. So we are looking at the big picture, CN, and also with Peak. So I've gathered my folks that specialize in oil and gas, and we're looking to see what potential car loads we can get there out of the Fort Nelson with respect to oil and gas. We are also potentially looking at the minerals coming out of that facility. So we are actively engaged with mining companies to load their product from truck to rail car in Fort Nelson and run that down to Fort St. John, Chetwynd, and Prince George and onward. We had potentially looked at other commodities coming out there, but right now we don't see much oil and gas coming out of there. We may see some frac sand go up there. Right now we have frac sand going up to Buick, which I think Brian had mentioned before. That's one of the reasons the rail line is maintained. We have natural gas, which is fractionated out. And there's a company called AltaGas who fractionate the natural gas, and they then load the propane onto rail in Blueberry area just south of Buick on the Fort St. John sub. So at this point, all our indicators, and we've gone across all the different commodities at CN, we don't see a lot of oil and gas coming out of Fort Nelson in the next 5 years. Now, that is always subject to change. So if more and more companies are looking to frack, so fracking is where you send water and frac sand down the hole so you can open up the fissures to extract the natural gas. If there's more fractionator sites closer to Fort Nelson, then more of the gas would be fractionated out. We'd get more propane to put onto rail, and that would be closer to Fort Nelson. But at this point, that's driven by the large midstreamer companies. For instance, if there's ever a Pembina out there, or there's ever an Enbridge, or there's a TransCanada. At this point, there's no line of sight. We are not aware of any of those companies setting up a fractionator close to Fort Nelson. But yes, there is oil and gas in that line, and there is an active site in the Blueberry First Nations.
Just an addition to that question, over the years, remember many a night where I needed an interpreter to tell me what Jim McDonald was saying. Thanks for that.
Another question in the back of the room.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Dickey. I have a couple of questions. There's a lot of things running through my mind right now. Again, I just want to acknowledge Abigail Neville, and she was so strong in her beliefs and does what is best for this community when it comes to the use of our resources. So my question, I guess, is to the town council and maybe the active people. So what's the highest and best use of that 600 MTK per year? Is there a better way where you can maximize employment opportunities, contracting opportunities for people in Fort Nelson, and not just the 89 jobs? So what's the best use? Rather than that, they can use pellets, chop them up and burn them up. What's the best use? How's the way to maximize employment? Well, that's a question. I guess it's for the town council. The other one was in terms of the MOU, but again, that's something, hopefully there'll be community meetings that have questions on that, but that's where I'll ask that. But CN, now that you're on the rail, hey, we need supply lines, secured supply lines for Fort Nelson. So when the highway closed down for fires or whatever, we need ways of getting food in and out. So not just industry. So again, all the things that you are doing already, that's great. But again, you still have that food security. You got to add that to the list. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So I think, that's from town council's perspective, we're willing to look at all the different opportunities that might be out there for the resources that we have. This is a project that's moving along in its lifespan. We've got Peak here to talk about what that looks like. There's not a lot of other folks banging down our door to get in here and have a look at what those resources are. So really, we need to be open-minded about what potential opportunities are going forward. And I'll ask if you've got any additions to that.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for the question, Kathy. It's a really, really good question. The one about the MOU, probably not too much for this meeting, but certainly I'd take that on too. But the one about best value for the trees. So I don't know any better way to judge the value for the trees except for economically. And what I know for sure is that a sawmill shut down here, a plywood plant shut down here, OSB plant shut down here, all to do with economic issues. So some of it being CN, in fairness, not to call down CN with the support we're getting now, but certainly the forest. And if you talk to Hank Ketchum at West Fraser, the guy that runs West Fraser, he would say his biggest problem over the last 40 years has been the rent. And so there's some historic issues that, Karen, it's really, really good to see the way you're addressing them. But from my side, you have to start with something. It doesn't matter what job you're doing or what. I've done nothing but construction my whole life, and you have to start some way. And one of the things that's a problem up here is if you're going to just log the spruce and the pine, you're leaving all the poplar there, and that's not good. And so from my side, it makes sense financially and economically to start with the poorer trees and then to work into because we know we can make money off those bigger trees and the spruce and pine. So that's how I look at it, Kathy. This is phase one of an integrated forest complex that I've been involved in all my life. And so I think that even though the economic model has shown other companies went bankrupt here, take a look at High Level. High Level is doing it successfully. So that's why that's one of the biggest reasons why I think we can do it successfully.
I'll just dovetail on top of Brian's comments, and the more commodities we can move from Fort Nelson, the better. So happy to talk to all potential shippers.
Yeah. And on that, to Jim's point, Jim, I've certainly talked to mines. We've had mines come in here and talk to us about loading in the back end of the OSB plant. And so we also believe the Tacoma site is perfect for some reloading. So very, very excited about anybody else that wants to. All I know is this big project can't go ahead without the rent. And so that's why I'm here talking about it, but we're certainly talking to other people, and so is CN.
Yes.
Hey, there's a question that was typed in here. So it's a person that doesn't have a name on it, but it's congratulations to both Peak and CN. Is there a website or process that may allow the community to support the resurrection of the service to Fort Nelson? And we certainly have a Peak website, Peak Renewable website. And I will make sure that people listening, there's a couple of people listening on the phone that are in charge of that website. And we certainly need to put a page on our Peak Renewable website that talks about how process. And I think there's people in this room that'll help me with that. Certainly, I talked to a couple today. So I don't know who said, did this person leave a name? Who? Oh, it's John.
John, you don't have to answer.
And then there's a couple more. Do you want to go with that one there?
I just want to, I've got a follow-up question of my own.
Okay.
Kathy's, I suppose, and it has to do with, you know, the use of the fiber and all its potential uses. And I'm just wondering, you know, are you expecting that the entire fiber supply of the community forest is going to be used by you, or is there an expectation that the community forest will be able to do what it's doing, or are you expecting that entire fiber supply to come to your now?
Our expectation is that we will be the best answer for the community forest. We do not understand how the community forest, especially for the pulpwood or the grindings or anything like that. Our expectation is we have to be the right answer to them. It's not contractual, but we would understand that we won't understand if we're not the right answer. That will be on us. So it's not contractual. It should be the best answer for the community forest.
Right, but if they find locals who want to do some manufacturing and they give them some tenure.
I 100% hope that they would help that person, as would I. As our Peak, we will be trying to help local people too. I have a guy named, I can't remember now, was it National Forest Products or some company from Vancouver has phoned us just lately and talked to us. Certainly Mr. Peterson up here, I think was his name, the local guy that's been talking for a long time about doing. We believe in sharing the product for sure.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead and ask one of those questions. I've got one back there.
Okay, there's a couple more. Would Peak utilize the slash from logging by grinding and hauling it in? There's absolutely no question that one of the right ways to, the question is, do you do it in a tub grinder in the bush, or do you bring those grindings in? But we want to 100% use all the pulpwood and the wood grinding. We think that should be ground up, not burned. So that's one. And what would be done with this material? There's two ways that you use that material. One is we have big heaters we have to take the fiber from 50% moisture down to 12% moisture, and that needs a lot of heat. So we can burn the bark there's actually in the OSB plant, there's a saltant system that burns it right now, and it's not big enough to do what we need, but so some of the worst stuff that doesn't make pellets will be burning there to create heat to dry the wood. So there's two processes that it gets used for. And then does Peak intend to start logging before an FID is made on the pellet plant? Well, that's somebody pretty technical, because I don't think most people know what FID means. FID is more of a government or pulp mill or engineering term. It's final investment decision. I would tell everybody in this room that I made that decision 3 years ago already. I wouldn't be up here spending 10 million if I hadn't decided we were going to make this work. So starting to log, I was actually really, really happy to see that Kathy Craig and Jake Blackmore and some of those type of people in the world have been up here already starting to log. It's really, really good for us, for Peak and for the city. If some logging starts up here, boy, you'll never hear me complain about that. More power to you for getting that going.
Okay, I've got a question here.
Problem with CN, with their first group. My name is Claude Rocan. I worked on the railway. Problem I see, even Port Nelson, is that first bridge on the Sickening. You can't pull a double decker through there. You're gonna have to replace it. How come CP can go all the way to Prince Rupert double decker all the way? And then it can go anywhere on the port and get loaded. They can't do it here.
Thanks, Karen.
So a bit of a technical question to you, Karen, about that first bridge. And so Claude has worked for the rail before, and his concern is that you won't be able to do double decker rail cars on this line, and so he's wondering how you're going to go about doing that.
Yeah, at this point, he's right. We would just be hauling containers in single stacked containers in TTX well cars if we had products that were coming out of Fort Nelson. But all the products that we're looking at right now are not going to be using containers. They're going to be using other rail cars, such as gondola cars or diesel, which are tank cars. The wood pellets could be in open gondola cars. And the other products, the laws go in what's called a spine car. But we don't see any commodities at this point looking to use the container car system. It's more economical to use the other models of cars.
I would add to that in Fort St. John, the pellet plant, in Chetwynd, the pellet plant, in Houston, all the pellet plants that I've been involved in, like 7 in British Columbia, have all been like a grain car looking thing.
Yeah.
I've never seen a double decker pellet hauling down this road.
And it's like a grain car, except with the grain car lid cut off the top.
Yeah. I just, in addition to this, a guy named Claude has asked, has there been any discussion recently to extend the rail line further north? And from my side, as being a proud British Columbia person, I sure hope that very quickly we're looking at extending this rail line north. And it's a dream, I think, probably for a lot of people in this room or a lot of people on the call. And that's my non-railway answer.
So
no pressure.
Yeah. So we haven't had a request recently about extending north. I do know my colleagues in this role probably 10 years ago do get the odd discussion or request to come up, but it always just turns out to be discussions. It doesn't get beyond any material points after that, because it's going to take, just like this project, significant capital investment. And the question always comes down to who's going to provide the capital for that investment to build the rail line. Like one of the problems with rail, it's extremely capital intensive. So every year ourselves, we ourselves, every year spend $2.8 billion maintaining the main line. So from Prince Rupert to Prince George, from east to Edson to Edmonton, all the way down to Toronto. It takes a lot of money and manpower just to maintain those lines. So that's one of the problems with railway. To get into it, it takes so much money. And the question, who pays?
Reading your financials, it looks worth it.
Thanks for that. I have another question for the board.
My name is Andy speaking. I'm from Dalton. I believe-
Sorry, could they speak closer to the mic? Brian, could you ask them to speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, I can't hear it either, sorry.
My name is Andy speaking. I'm from Fort Nelson. My question is, like, I'm very pleased to hear that Peak will be using what we call waste wood for heat. But that's not going to be near enough, I don't think, for what you're intending to do. So what I'm thinking, how much of the shortcome will come from natural gas? Like, I'm thinking of Cryopeak having to shut down recently. Is this going to make it possible that we can use more of our natural resources here?
So I think I heard that you think we'll be using some natural gas for heating. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
That's not true. There might be a little bit for pilot projects, like to light the dryers up but very minimal natural gas use will be used in this. We use the wood that you can't, like the brown wood, so the bark and some of the fines will be going into the burning system that gets the moisture down to 12% before we put it into the pellet prints, but no natural gas or very minimal natural gas. Including for heating the building, that's all done, but we don't need natural gas for that either.
Okay, do I see any other, I see Jim's looking to ask another question, but, okay, this question here.
Hi, I'm Robert Saunders. Getting back to Kathy's question, what is the guarantee our spruce logs will not be continued to be shipped out? And what is the timeline for processing our logs versus shipping them out? We're talking about phase one, but I mean, you talked about a cant mill at the beginning of the pellet plant, but nobody's heard anything about a cant mill barely all night.
That's a very fair question. And the first part of it, it certainly was mentioned on my slide, and it certainly was mentioned in my comments, and it's certainly really, really important to me. I believe the value of those spruce trees needs to stay in this town to the best of our ability. And I think a cant mill is only a very basic start compared to our company has built 25 sawmills bid. Before I sold it, we built 25 sawmills in North America. If there's 30 sawmills built in North America over the last 15 years, our company has done 25 of them. So I'm a fairly much a subject matter expert in sawmilling, and canting is a very, very small first phase process of sawmilling. And we absolutely need to do something better up here. And I still go back to that plywood made money here. Every time I talk to Scott Berry, I get shit about them. Somehow he thinks it was me that was the reason the plywood plant went down. I don't think he believes that, but he certainly doesn't reminding me that it made money. So I think that plywood might be a good answer for some of the big spruce. So I do not know a timeline today, though. 3 years? That's just a random, completely random. I'm more worried right now about getting the rail and getting the project going than I am about phase two, honestly, although it's a really valid question.
Okay.
What is this? Where did the city stand? Sitting there looking at the picture. I'm asking, what is council doing? What is the town board doing? Because it's very simple. And until you get the rail, part time is again for the facts.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me what is the town doing? Other than reducing service and shutting down for the town. Reducing our benefits. We have really to continue. And that's a bit lengthy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is a rant. I continue, I think it's down with the service, the service.
Yeah.
People can go off. When do we start to realize that without something to generate revenue? we're just gonna come to another meeting, and 2 years later, we're gonna still be talking about the same thing, because we're going to walk through this.
Yeah. So understand your question, and Jim's question is to the town council, and you know, I guess probably myself as representative of the town council here tonight is, you know, what are we doing to drive the economy in this community where we seem to be losing services, and all the services that he's talking about are provincial services, and you know, it's frustrating as a leader to constantly be seeing you know, the bleeding of provincial jobs out of this community. And we just have a government that doesn't recognize that this is a service community. They see it as a white spot on the road. They see centralization as the way to deal with a lot of the issues that they have when it comes to trying to hire people to put in here. And, you know, if they can't find somebody to put in here, they'll centralize the job someplace else, and it comes out of this community. But this is the kind of project that we're looking for to try to move that economy along. But we don't pay for a lot of the things we talked about. Those are provincial programs, whether it's policing, a hospital, you know, those are outside of our scope of responsibility. We can try to have some influence, and we do what we can, you know, to lobby and to try to work on these problems like the hospital slowdown and seeing some of these other jobs leaving the community. We recognize that it's a problem, but as Brian has said, Victoria's a long ways from here, and it's very difficult. 5 years, this community's been trying to get a meeting with the Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, and we haven't been able to get them to go. But we hope to be able to work regionally, and we hope to be able to work with our First Nations partners, because mayors can get some doors open, but I think mayors and chiefs and our communities together can do a better job getting those doors open. And we will present as many good ideas as we can. We don't go down there with just the bitching. We try to go down there with a solution. And one of the, we feel we need to get this province, this government, to recognize that this is more than just a wide spot on the Alaska Highway. It's a service community. And if they don't continue to keep services here, then they will lose the service community when it's time for them to come and get the resources that are here, because they really don't recognize where the revenues.
I would like to add to that, to Jim, that from my experience, towns that are have a living industry. We need to have a living industry, and when they see the revenue coming in, they listen. And so for me, it's a pretty dead town right now. As far as there's a bit of service like Baker Hughes and people like that, but there's not very much what makes it a live industry. And so I feel that this is one thing we can. I got a question here, and it doesn't quite make sense, and it doesn't have a name on it, but it says how many cubic meters in the total of softwood and hardwood trees per year in Fort Nelson is built. I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to answer that. Our project, when it's fully built, we're expecting to use somewhere between 1 million and 1.8 million cubic meters a year. And if pellets are used to make hydrogen, where would the hydrogen facility be located? So that's a really, really valid question. We actually took a look at what I call the West Coast Transmission, or the Spectra plant, and I think it's got different names now, but when it was built, to me, that was the West Coast Transmission plant. And they did a couple $1 million in studies on the geological formations underneath there to see if it was good for carbon sequestration. And we feel that the regulatory body in British Columbia will never allow that to happen under the regime that's there today, where we know that there's the biggest carbon sequestration in Canada, starts in Edmonton and goes into the heartland. It goes south 200 miles, and it was built by a guy named Ian McGregor. We've had Ian McGregor up here twice to meet with the First Nation. He's my partner in a company called H2N. And we have a piece of land in Redwater, which is Fort Saskatchewan. And our expectation is the first pellets that will be made here will go overseas. And then we're trying to develop a Canadian industry out of pellets. So the reason for the heartland is there's a pipe, there's a 5-kilometer pipe that goes around Redwater. And it's like a 20-inch pipe with 2-inch thick walls. And the petrochemical plants all use hydrogen, and they all take their hydrogen out of that plant, out of that line. And that is such a thick line because hydrogen is really dangerous. Just think the Hindenburg. That every time I hear people talk about hydrogen and I hear blah, 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 I think about the Hindenburg blowing up. That was a hydrogen thing. So it's a lot easier to transport the lumber out of here or the pellets out of here than it is to have that plant. And what we're talking with the First Nation is do they get paid just for the pellets or will they be part of the HGN pot? That's a live conversation that's happening with us right now, Jim. And we also feel the regulatory body in Alberta is way easier to build something like that. I can tell you that my partner Ian McGregor went twice to Victoria and he said, Brian, I'm 72 years old. I don't have the amount of time left to go through the regulatory body down there. So we think we can get the pellets built, no problem, and ship them to Edmonton.
Thanks. Another question from the floor?
My name is Cameron Allen. Two questions quickly. With all the forest fires that went through here last summer and probably more to come, how much of that wood could be used in making pellets or other products? And because it's laying on the ground, there's probably a timeline there. What would that timeline possibly be? My second question is, how can we as a community or people in this community support the efforts of CN and Peak with our government to try and get these, to help in getting these things through? So it's letter writing, whatever, who we talk to and how do we move forward with that?
So thank you, Cam, for the questions. And I'm going to answer the first one that's not really part of those two things. And I would encourage you that if you take me to that hot spring that you talked about last weekend, it will really I have an airplane and I have the privilege of hanging in Quest, and so I've become friends with Zonka and Cam and really appreciate those guys, what they do for this community. First of all, the firewood. So in 1985, we had a big fire in the Kootenays by Canal Flats where I live today. And we actually invented double ringed barkers that are now pretty common in the industry. And that was to take the burnt wood off the cambium layer. And we were getting 2 and 3 years down there to make lumber. So I consider it a big opportunity. I consider this to be one of the biggest opportunities out here. And hell, it's not even the burn stuff. I see those fires are still going. You told me that last weekend, and I saw at least 3 pictures today of live fires that are still burning out there right now. It's unbelievable, right? And so number one, to the forest fire questions, and yes, we can use those wood. And the timeline of how long you can use those wood for, we believe 2 to 3 years for sure. And we also believe that if you don't do something with this, it's just going to keep burning. Like to me, the definition of insanity would be, let's do nothing. Like otherwise you're going to burn this all up. And I mean that we got lucky this year that in my mind, that fire, and as big and as bad as it was, it didn't hit an awful lot of merchantable timber. And that could have been way worse for this community. So I think we need to start addressing this now. And every year we waste is just going to lead to a fire. Thanks, Cam. There's a couple more here. Are we to believe another proponent will pop up to build a sawmill to utilize the spruce and pine? What proportion of volume in conifer will be turned into pellets? Well, certainly all the pulpwood, so the tops. It's the best value that we can get. So in my world, I would assume 5-inch and up. So 5-inch to the butt would be used, would go away, but everything from 5-inch to the top would be turned into pellets or bark and grindings that you'd use to heat. The 2 processes I talked about. We have to create heat to dry, and we have to have product to make pellets. So that's what the coniferous is for. And are we to believe another proponent will pop up to build a sawmill? So I don't know if it'll be another proponent or us. I certainly know that I have the expertise. Our company has the expertise. We're sitting with a guy that's sitting in this audience right now, whose name is on the bottom of, for sure, 20 of the last 30 modern mills built in North America. And he's sitting here listening. We have the expertise. We're very close to the major corporations because we build all their mills. So the word, if a proponent is going to pop up, as we run out of fiber and as housing starts are more and more in need, I actually believe somebody will come out of the woodwork, let's call it. And I actually am talking to people right now that believe what the fiber is like up here. So I actually don't think that is as much of a problem as just getting something going that we can prove that it's financially viable for somebody to invest up. That's that one. And one more question. The open house tonight with CNRL providing their perspective potential is encouraging. Just coming together with share info is positive. The Bob Lundys, Harry Dickies, and other pioneers in the world will be proud. Man, I sat on Bob Lundy's deathbed. Bob Lundy was one of my best friends in the world. And he still talked about his days at the coach house and the days we were in the old hotel. And but Bob just loved his experience up here. And he's one of the people that I get my drive from. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And it's really neat to see his name mentioned here. Thanks.
I don't see any hands up, so I have another question. Since I've been here, I've heard an awful lot of rumors about you and your relationship with Canfor. You know, there's many, if not most residents in the community that believe Canfor took advantage of this community, and some will say they downright screwed us. Few, if any, want to see Canfor benefit in any way from the timber supply around Fort Nelson. What do you say to those people who feel that you're in bed with Canfor and are doing their bidding?
Trying to figure out how to answer that, being in bed with Canfor. So first of all, that's what Ben Wall and I got into our discussion about. I am absolutely not a Canfor employee, and I stole a guy named Alistair Cook, and I believe there might be some people in here who understand who that was. Alistair was one of their best management people, and Jimmy was grooming him to be the next CEO, and I hired him. And believe me, for the next 3 years, no one in like the Don Kings of the world and the Michael Thornbergs of the world, the guys that run Canfor, they wouldn't even talk to me. And today, I actually talked to Michael Thornberg. He's the guy that left Canfor after 25 years as chairman of the board. I talked to him last week. He was retired in Palm Springs. Don Kane, the CEO, and I talked maybe the day before Christmas to say Merry Christmas. Stephen Mackey, who lived in this town, and I talk maybe once a month. I have zero to do with Canfor, but they're also not my enemies. Like anybody that thinks I'm going to sit and call on a company that I've made millions and millions of dollars off of, it ain't going to happen. I like Canfor. I think that Canfor is that what could have been Talco, Canfor, West Fraser. They're just all the same corporate bullshit. And I am not Canfor's enemy, but I'm absolutely not in bed with them. I'm not doing any work with Canfor, not one bit right now, and haven't for a couple of years. So I don't know how else to answer that.
How much money do you owe them, and how are you going to pay them back?
How much money do I owe Canfor?
Yes.
We have two different deals with Canfor. One is for buying the asset, and one is for buying the forestry. The asset base, when we sold, we got $5 million off. We got $5 million off selling the start of the OSB equipment from a company named Rex in America. And we told Canfor that they weren't getting any of that because we don't believe Canfor has a better option than us. We believe they played around with Ronnie Stern for 3 years. Nothing happened with it. They never got a cent. We believe that we're the best option for them by far, and we don't believe they would ever try to take that away from us. That's what I believe. The second thing is, when we bought the license off them, we gave them a little bit of money, and they get a little bit of money for every cubic meter we log. And I have never said that publicly, but it's a public question. That's a fair question. But basically, they financed me buying them, and so that's still the deal. So they are getting a little bit of money off me for the cubic meters when we log the stuff that's off their 600,000 cubic meter license.
Okay, and you'll use that money that you're generating to pay them the money that.
Some from the logs, but the majority of that money is paid for the day we start moving that. You'll notice on the slide presentation that I did, it said we absolutely were not moving any equipment till the fall of this year. That's because they have a little bit of what I would call mortgage on. I'm not allowed to move that equipment until I finish paying. And it's you know, I could be. It's been 3 years. I believe it's like $7.5 million that I still owe them. And so that money is really easy once we get our environmental permit in Enterprise Alabama, we get a big chunk, like 50 million or 40 million, and part of that is to pay Canfor, nothing to do with Fort Nelson, but to do with the equipment that's still there, because I have to pay to buy this stuff.
Thank you. So, and thanks for putting some of those rumors to rest that I've been hearing about for a year. So, see, how many logging trucks do we expect? The question is, how many logging trucks do we expect to see go through town this year from Peak?
Well, not zero this year. I believe that that's a different answer for the community force, Jim. I believe that those people are trying to log, but that's got nothing to do with me. Or Peak.
Okay, and I have one more question, and it's the science around, carbon capture and the environment. So there's been a lot of media reports and some pellet industry publications that say turning whole logs into pellets is not an environmentally sound practice. What does the science say about the difference between storing and capturing carbon in mature standing forests as opposed to capturing carbon in pellets, processing them, and then to store carbon, as well as the new free growing trees?
Okay, I love it. I am grade 11 and I'm a millwright in 11. So first of all, I'm the wrong guy, but what I'm going to challenge my people that are listening, like Justin Napoleon and John Brewer, we need, I hope Dave Nick is listening too. We need to put on our website the answer to that question. First of all, it's just unbelievable when you cut the tree down and put it into a pellet, and after that, and we take it to where we're going, there's no carbon that ever goes into the atmosphere again, and so the new trees start up, and it's the best thing. What kills it is what kills the carbon sequestration is the burn piles. So that then the carbon is just going back into the atmosphere, forest fires. And even when the product just goes to the pulp mill, because the pulp mill just emits that back up into the atmosphere. So what we're doing with the H2N thing is a closed loop system that we're storing all the carbon. So we're very, very, very proud to answer that question, but a hell of a lot more technical play than I just answered it, because I, above all, am not a technical guy on the hydrogen side.
So I think the answer to that question is important, because I think once you do finally start building this plant and start moving product into the plant, or maybe even before, you will see, folks from the environmental movement here in your face, in our community, really wreaking havoc with your project.
Yeah.
And it will need to stand on good science. And so I think you need to get that to your webpage, and you need to educate our residents, as well as many others, really understand why that is an environmentally positive move to make.
It's a perfectly fair question, and we absolutely need to take it on. I've got it in my mind, and I honestly, from me to all you people, if I feel down the road that I'm not wanted here, I got lots of other places where I'm really wanted. And so I don't feel that today. I feel there's some people, I hope there's some people in the room, I love different opinions, but I believe the majority of the people actually want jobs, and they actually believe that. And so for the first answer is there will be a very technically sound answer to this question. You can find it on Peak Renewables website by, give me a week, because some people don't move as fast as I like, but we have good people that can answer that very technically. The question is really more around, do they want logging? Because how can it be possible that it's okay to cut a tree down and become pulp? It's okay to cut a tree down to be plywood. It's okay to cut a tree down to be a 2x4, but it's not okay for some reason to become electricity. Like that's not sound thinking, sorry. That means that person just doesn't want a key tree to be cut down. So I look forward to answering it better, because we feel we're better than sawdust. We believe we're better than the sawmill. We believe we're better. We believe the residuals from the sawmill should automatically go to the pellet plant, which will make it. But then if we take and burn that in Canada, we sequester the carbon. It's the best. It's 100% foolproof compared to any other process that's out there. So we have a technical answer, but I'm going to leave that to technical people.
Good, thank you very much.
There's another question in writing here that I don't have a clue. What will be the net taxation benefit to the town here from this project? Jim Fu. I don't, it's a good question. I don't have a clue. I think that you can do the math based on the jobs, but I've never been the guy that could answer a tax. Hell, I don't even know how to do my own taxes.
So, I think there will be benefit with respect to the value of the building. That's done by the BC Assessment Authority, and then we will apply our industrial tax rate, whatever that value is, and those are the taxes that you'll pay. But I hope you'll do a lot more in our community than just pay taxes. And,
Absolutely.
I hear you standing there telling us that you will be a benefit to this community in the long run, and I'll take you at face value for that. And there's people here that have known you longer than me, and they'll make their own decision. But,
Thank you. There's another question from the same Jim Fu.
Okay.
Question for Mayor and Chief. If Peak wants to build the sawmill, then why doesn't the NRRM and FNFN hold them to that before getting on board with Peak so fully? That's a valid question, and if it depends in what way that would come to me. From my side, we have stated what we're going to do, and we're going to do it. And we don't know what phase 2 is today. We absolutely believe that it needs to be, though, that it's a short period of time. And I stated 3 years here publicly for the first time ever, that we believe there's a period of time that we absolutely, it makes sense to take those logs out of town. We believe that we should, and we could build a sawmill here. I don't know that we would. It's not what our expertise has been building the sawmills, not running them. But I sure have a lot of friends that if they knew that they could just get the saw logs, they would be willing to put the investment in here. So that would be how I answer that.
thanks. Sandy has another question.
Thank you. It's actually for all three, Karen, Brian, and you, Rob, as representing council. Have you ever seen any effectiveness using media exposure for something like rallying the province for a project like this? Is that something that you've ever witnessed? Like the news, et cetera, too?
Well, my personal experience with the media is that they can be a very powerful tool that we can use, but I find that if you want to, whoever you're aiming your message to, and depending on what that message is, you alienate them as a future partner, because you force them into into a reckoning and an answer. So going in the media for me is the last resort, particularly if you're in an adversarial position, and if you're not, then you're working with them, and there's no need really, except to celebrate your successes, which I hope that we'll be able to do with this project and other projects that we do.
Well, and I don't mean like by an attack, I mean more like news coverage of what's going on in the community and what's needed,
Sure.
not like the problems.
Yeah, so positive press releases then to recognize, as we move forward, that's something that we would need to do in conjunction with each other. So, Brian,
So a couple of different things. I don't know a lot about it, Sandy. I'm glad to hear you just volunteered though. That we do have people that are listening. I mean, I'm sitting here reading a thing that says, we have who I would call the most talented bureaucrat in the province working for us in Victoria, and he's going to hate that I said that. We got a guy named Dave Nicholson is his name, and he was Deputy Minister of Energy, Deputy Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister of this, Deputy Minister of Mining, and he's got an amazing mind. I have never worked with a guy with more capacity. And Dave just texted me, and he goes, I might be in a little bit of trouble from him. I can tell by the way he wrote it, but he goes, I am listening and keeping track of your commitments. We have good answers. That's about the technical answer about carbon sequestration. Dave is our expert on that. So very, very comfortable. I've got like 3 or 4 texts that people are texting me directly. Not one of them is really complimentary on my speaking abilities. So I love it. But Sandy, I would love nothing better than to hear this grassroots movement started here. I believe though that we can do it. I can't. In other words, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary, one person, one voice in the wilderness does not do. It could go back to the parable of you can break one stick easy, but you can't break a bundle of sticks easily. And I have actually learned that in life. When in my younger years, I sometimes would go to Victoria and blah, 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 nothing happened. But when we made, we called it we had a Central Ontario Wood Process Association. And we actually got heard when we spoke as a group. So the best thing by far would be out of this meeting, if there would be something like that with the town council and the chamber, people that aren't just one individual just gets ignored. And so that's what I would say to that.
Strength in numbers, there's no doubt about that. We've learned that. Cliff has a question.
Cliff Erskine, this one, I'm gonna take a little heat off Brian here for a minute because he's been getting all the questions tonight. So Karen, I'm gonna direct this one to you. You indicated earlier on at the start of your speech there that, CN was looking into different departments. We're looking at the costing. Brian came up with the magic number of $100 million. 50 of that was gonna be from CN and 50 from the province.
No, not CN. The transportation fund, that's a federal program and they've already signed off. That is not CN. So there, Karen, you owe me.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, so the federal government's in for 50,
Yeah.
and is there anything on your side that you're working with the province of BC, and you leveraging that CN can do with BC to make sure that the other half of that the unknown is right now, or you've got a timeline that you're saying it's coming quick, or it'll happen quickly, but you don't have the numbers, departments are working on them. So kind of for us, knowing that there's $135 million up against a project that simply, in my eyes, not likely to go unless we get a rail. So I'm looking at a timeline for Brian's side and Pete and for the community. What might that be? Would that be 3 months down the road? Is that 6 months down the road, knowing that he's in tear down stage right now? That's gonna last till 24. Then we're gonna be looking at putting a mill in 25, maybe starting up in 26 or 7. So there's other industries you indicated you're dealing with, and I'm thinking that that's possibly Hanny Butte mine, maybe, that looking at bringing ore down to the rail. So can you give us a timeline and how that might be from your side of things, that we might find out when construction may happen on that rail line and how much it's gonna cost, and will the financing all be in place for it?
So we'll answer backwards. The construction will only happen when the financing is in place. So the financing is to dovetail on Brian's comments, 50% will come from the federal government under the NTCF fund. NTCF stands for National Transportation Corridor Funding Program, and it's run by the federal government of Canada. The other half, 50%, will come from the BC government. Without either or input of funds, then the project does not go ahead. I think Brian even made comments to that at the very beginning of this project. We absolutely have to have the funds covered by the federal, 50% the federal government and 50% the BC government. Now, the timing on when the BC government is going to contribute, I will leave that to Brian and his person, David, who's in Victoria, you've mentioned him a couple times, who is the former director, deputy minister of finance and deputy minister of mining. And I think he'll have better luck at getting funds from the BC government than I think CN with. But we certainly support the project. So that is solely with Brian and David of Peak Renewables. They've got the relationships, and they've had many meetings with BC government, and they will continue to have them until they secure that funding. And sorry, you've got another, sorry?
Sorry, I'll wait till I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
Well, I would like to add to that I can, first of all, Cliff, thanks for being here. I appreciate when I saw you walk in. I would like to add to this that there is a timeline. We are getting paid economically right now for this year to take that equipment out. It's got nothing to do with the pellet plant. It's got nothing to do with the rail, although we would like the rail. And they've actually talked to us about, can they take that stuff to Alabama? That rail line that they're tied to ends up right on that site right now. So we're very, very happy if we could get this going in time, but we will truck that 192 trucks or something, Leaf, is that what I heard? Leaf says more, like 200 trucks, that big amount of trucks out here will do. We would prefer the rail. But I can tell you that we economically will stay in this town for the year of 2024 and half of 2025. In that time, which means this year, we have to get this funded and then they get going. And they can't do anything until it's funded. And that's not CN's fault. They're trying hard and they've been just totally supportive of what we're doing. And we're working with Victoria, and we need Chief Charlene to work on that. And we need the community to work on that. It's the biggest thing holding this project up is that rail, for sure.
It's the funding of the rail.
Sorry.
The
It's
funding.
I agree with you, by the way. I would completely support that comment. It's the funding of the rail. And we think we have that half committed by the federal government. This is not a federal problem. This is not a CN problem. This is a provincial problem. So one more question. I get that do you know how much work has been awarded to local companies? Is there a target for local contract employment? Well, I learned at about noon today about 1:30 this afternoon, I learned from Chief Charlene that she's working on a scorecard. And I was very, very happy because I believe what gets graded gets the best results. And so there will be a scorecard based on local contracting, and we're doing a certain amount right now. And Cliff has been part of it for 10 years up until this year, and we're still talking right now about that. Cliff has been a great, I'm not sure that plant would still be, I'm not sure that building would still be there if it wasn't for what Cliff did over the last 10 years. So I get that, don't worry. So other than that, I mean, and that person was anonymous. I think it's excellent that they don't all listen to your rules, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and we've got time for two more questions. I've got two on the floor that haven't spoken yet. So we're down at 7. I think it's just about 7 now. So we'll take this question and one more over here, and that'll be the end of some stuff.
My name is Sherry Hart. My question is for Karen. What I'm hearing is that CN Rail is a service provider who stands to earn a significant amount of money through providing services to Brian Fair and his associates over the next 20 years and possibly more. I would like you to help me understand why CN Rail is not putting money into this rail line. Why is it expected to come from the provincial and federal government?
So I appreciate the question. Sorry to the lady that asked it. You recall, I think it was 4 or 5 questions ago, we talked about CN and the overall goal, the overall company. CN has a very large network. We have something like 23,000 miles, 23,000 miles across the network. We span from the BC coast to the Halifax coast, all the way down to Louisiana. Every year, strategically, we only have one pot of money to pull from. So we have to be very strategic where we spend those funds. And we do this across the whole network. And so, like I mentioned before, we obviously have to maintain the main line, because you can't have a main line. There's no use spending all the money in a branch line in the provinces without having a fully functioning main line. So I think everybody understands that. Now we also have commitments to maintain the rail lines to support the work. But the problem is we have competing requests for the same amount of funds. So it goes back to the more business we can have to support the rail line, then there's a higher chance for getting funding from CN to support not this project, but generally across the whole network.
Okay, thank you very much. So the second question was answered by you already. So that brings us to the end of the question.
I have one more comment. I just got a text from Ben Wall, and he asked me to congratulate Karen on the fact that they're actually participating in the discussion on the rail issues. I can tell you Ben Wall feels the same way as I do, and probably many people in this room. We're not used to having good connections like we have tonight with you. And I'm sitting here looking at a note from Dave Nick thanking me for that you're on this discussion as well. So I think from all of us in the room who have had 40 years of tough answers, I think we'll let you off on your answer. I think you probably have a CapEx budget that goes for new stuff too, but I won't get into that with you tonight.
Thanks, Brian.
But love the answer, love that you've been here and listened to us, and I look forward to, this girl reminds me a little bit of what we think about Vancouver, Victoria. She was going to be here, and then she figured out that there wasn't really good wasn't really good plane service in here, and I was just shaking my head reading her email. It's like, duh. But I think that she has tried awfully hard for her first meeting, so I really, really appreciate it, Karen, and can't wait to see you actually come up to Fort Nelson. Oh, today wouldn't have been a good day.
Yeah, I've been to Fort Nelson.
Oh.
I flew in there 4 years ago, and then I drove from Fort Nelson down to Fort St. John and Shetburn. It was very lovely. It was the middle of summer, though. It was the middle of
Better
summer.
than lots of people in Victoria, I'll tell you that. Good job. Sorry.
Okay, you guys. Enough chatting. I've got one last question because you answered two questions at once. I'm gonna let Kathy Dickey ask the last question tonight, give her the last word. Just because we're all friends.
We graduated here. Question, so just following up on Sherry's question about the P3 bridge, public-private partnership. So we have requests to make the CN Rail. What about you, Brian? What about, show your commitment? You sold your stuff in the States for billions of dollars. You got a $5 million check. Come on, Brian.
Well, that's a good question. I think you missed the part where I've already spent 10 million, but apparently Kathy, but I've personally spent on this project very close to $10 million. We've done what I would call project development work by writing a check to Canfor, by writing a check to the Ministry of Forests, by having security out there for 10 years, by spending the money on Cliff over here, and by, there's just an awful lot of engineering that's gone into this. But I've personally spent 10 million, not 5 million on this, and we'll keep spending money on this. We do have money put up there. This can't be done without our money, Kathy. It's impossible, and we'll keep doing it.
Okay, Brian, thank you for that answer. Karen, thank you very much for coming online here and answering some of those questions, and really, I believe, bringing some good news to the community. It was crickets before, and now we're starting to hear, that there's some movement from CN, and so whether you're making an investment, a cash investment immediately or later, the fact that you and your team are working on this gives us a lot of hope that this could actually happen. And Brian, thank you for your candid answers. There's been a lot of rumors. There's lots of folks that have got some issues with you, and I hear about it all the time. And that's why I asked some of the questions that I did was to really try to put some of those to bed.
Yep.
And for me, you've stood in front of the community, and for those who braved this 40 below weather and came out, I certainly appreciate that you've done that. I hope we can do it more often. It's been quite a while since you've been in the community. Hopefully we can do it a little more often.
So I'd like to add one thing to that. First of all, I sure appreciate everybody that come out, from the town councilors that I see, mostly from Charlene and her leadership group. I walked down the hall with three of her councilors, and then I saw Harvey walk in, and really, really, really good to see the First Nation representation in town at this meeting. So thanks, Chief, I can't find her.
Sitting at the back.
Okay, and then also James Tate, thanks for coming up. Behind the scenes, just like Dave Nick in Vancouver, in Victoria, who's on this call, James Tate, the lawyer right over there, has been a big, big, big part of the success of the Fort Nelson First Nation. And I got the privilege of talking to him for an hour or two last night, and very, very, very good compared to lots of the First Nations that I see. So thank you, Charlene, for bringing everything together here, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for braving the cold and coming out tonight, filling the room. Thank you to everybody online who took the time to ask questions and to sign in to this meeting. I appreciate it. Hopefully some of you got some of your questions answered. I think Brian's plane is firing up on the tarmac. I think he's not staying here tonight, so he probably won't be around to answer, questions that you might want to peg him with.
I'm around till like 7:45, so I got half an hour, 3/4 of an hour.
Yeah, okay, so there you go. So thank you very much for coming out, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do this again. Thank you, everybody.